Our next guest brought to you by the Arnold Palmer Design Whistler Golf Club. Off to an incredible start here in 2024. Amazing reviews on the course condition and the service. Reminding group organizers of 12 or more, not too early to get your September, October, buddy, and corporate trips booked. Prime time's filling up fast. You, the group organizer, you play for free. So tell us about your groups at whistlergolf.com/groups. Patrick Johnston covers the Canucks for the province and Post Media, and he joins us now after a busy day of Canucks.
Busy week.
Yeah, I was. Well, let's put it this way. I was getting ready to pick up Molly from school, and then we had piano, and then I was going to take her sister swimming, and the Canucks signed Teddy Bleuger, and I literally was walking away from school, and one of the other dads said, "Hey, PJ, what do you think about Blueger?" I'm like, "Are you kidding?" And so pulled that together, and then of course couldn't do the Zoom because that was during the swimming lesson. And then we're out of the pool, and we're at the library, lovely in North Burnaby, lovely library. And my phone buzzes, and it turns out they've traded, or they're trying to trade, or they're set to trade Ilya Mikheyev. And so you start talking to people. Well, the children are picking up books. This is modern life for us, modern hockey reporters. Yeah, busy day. I mean, certainly I don't understand Chicago's part of this trade. Like, yeah, I guess you needed a player, and I guess, yeah, you got to get to the cap floor. And Mikheyev, like, he doesn't hurt you defensively, but like basically the Canucks had a contract they wanted to get rid of, and the price was a trade back 4 drafts from now, and for some reason Sam Lafferty. And I just don't get it.
The Sam Lafferty part makes no sense.
Well,
like what?
He's a former Hawk, so they're probably going to re-sign him.
Just
great, but he's a free agent on Monday.
No, I know. Well, maybe they think other teams are on him.
Are they going to?
The other thing,
are they going to sign him for 8 years at some? I mean,
but the $700K versus the trade down. Like, how about you keep the $700K and no trade down? How about that?
Well, the other thing is, I do wonder whether they look at it and say we're going to move Mikheyev on here in a year,
maybe,
and get a second draft pick or a draft pick on top of the move up out of it.
Sure.
But no, I'm with you. In comparison to what Steve Yzerman did to get money this week, this is, comparatively speaking, very good work from Patrick.
Yeah, I mean, Patrick Alpin's done very good work. I talked to someone about this. I'm like, I don't understand this trade. There's some people around the league, and they're like, well, this isn't the first time Chicago's done something like this. So the implication being maybe Chicago's just not all that organized and maybe doesn't really know what they're doing. So anyway, the Canucks benefit. They're in a better position than they were yesterday. And I guess we'll see what they do with this extra $4 million in cap space.
So they benefit, but here's the thing: it deepens the need for a winger. It deepens the need for speed. And is there any part next year where they'll miss Mikheyev, like as a bounce back candidate? Will they be searching for this profile of winger next year at the trade deadline?
Maybe. I mean, the speed thing, you're right. The Lafferty and Mikheyev thing, those are 2 quick wingers from a team that wasn't necessarily noted for quickness. Now, that's not exactly a skill that's hard to find.
That's right.
So from that standpoint, I'm not that anxious. But no, you're right, Matt. Like there are things now. It's not just about the cap space; it's the talent space, and in the end, certainly Ilya Mikheyev, even with the scoring struggles, remained an NHL winger. They need to find at least one of those. And, Sam Lafferty, I think, was fine as a 4th line player, although, you knew probably they were just going to end up replacing him. So it's not catastrophic, by no means catastrophic, but you're right. Like, this is part of what we've been told all along, that in the end, this team is going to look different next year, partly because it has to, and partly because they want it to look different.
Would it be wrong or right to use this space to now jump in with both feet, back with the same old guys, with Joshua and Zadorov? How much of that is good and how much of that is folly?
Well, I mean, we've talked a lot about overpaying. Who would you overpay? I think I said from the beginning, if you're going to overpay a guy and it's not especially long-term, Dakota Joshua is a decent bet, given the growth in his game and the type of player he is. Certainly an opportunity now with Mikheyev gone for Joshua to fill that hole if they retain him. You knew that they've known all along, they've been saying all along, they know all along that they need a top-end winger. So obviously we're still thinking about that. The Zadorov story, it's still, I mean, Dan Milstein was involved in this. I mean, there was, I guess, I had heard a second team. I mean, it was, I guess, San Jose. And in the end, Mikheyev picked to go to Chicago. And, but, Milstein's been pretty clear. I mean, anytime I've heard anything from him, he said things have been quiet. I think the team knows what they want. So whether this has any effect, I don't know. I mean, you would think the agent agreeing to become involved in such a deal might lead to something else, but I don't have any impression that may be the case. I think in the end, we're sitting here knowing what the prices are and what the players want, and the Canucks are going to have to sit down and think about how they really do. I mean, they'll have had a plan. What do we do if we get rid of Mikheyev? What does that let us do? It certainly lets them re-sign people. So the fact that they are likely to run some of these guys back now seems obvious, but in the end, we're still waiting. We're at 5 days out, 4 days out. You never say never until it gets done.
What did you make of the Teddy Bleuger deal?
Listen, a player that came in was what we expected him to be, which was a quality penalty killer, a guy that I mean, the one thing that Patrick Allvin had suggested was that he thought he could score a lot more. I think we can see why in the end he has not been a 15-goal scorer in the NHL. Is he just doesn't have those hands, but he does everything else really well. And a handy communicator, a smart guy to have on your team. In the end, hopefully he's your fourth line center. I think that's the best role for him. The Canucks, I think, really do want to shore up that third line center, and whether I don't think that's Pius Suter. I think they would like to find someone else to sit in that spot. How they do that, again, comes back to that cap space. But yeah, I mean, he's fine. He's good. He's fine. I don't mind bringing him up. The numbers fine for what the role is. You think about it, it's still less than half what Jay Beagle was making to do the same job. And Teddy Bleuger is a better hockey player than Jay Beagle was when the Canucks signed him. So that's maybe a low bar to clear, but it's still worth considering what we've seen here before. And yeah, Blueger was an effective player. I think he's a handy player to have, and it's fine value for him.
They've avoided overpayment to this point.
For the most part, yeah.
Alan Walsh suggesting today that they could have got 9.5 if it was just about the money, but there's no world in which he was getting 9.5. So they've avoided mistakes like that at the very least.
Yeah.
I mean, what overall have the Canucks put themselves in a position to succeed here over the next few days if they want to make a trade, and certainly come July 1st?
I think so. They're not. They've been smart in how they've managed what cap space they've had to date. There have been a couple misfires, absolutely, Mikheyev being one of them. But they've been cautious and careful and deliberate in how they've used what's in front of them. And go back to the deadline. Like they probably could have made another deal or two, and they chose not to. Even though the picks, even knowing that the picks that they had were late round picks, which aren't terribly useful, as I wrote about today. Like late round picks just don't lead to successful players very much anymore. Even looking at that and knowing that they probably weren't going to get much value out of the draft, they still held firm and decided not to use that capital to do a move that I think might have helped them in the short term. But they sat back and said, listen, there's going to be deals that we are going to like probably better at the draft in the summer. There's a lot of things happening around the league. We know this. This is as good a position as they've been in a long time. I mean, we probably have to go back to the Gillis era, there were challenging times with the cap and the Sedins and the famous trip to re-sign the Sedins, but it is of that ilk of, you've got a strong team here. How do you make it better? And that was what Gillis and his group strongly understood, was that, listen, we've inherited a solid core here, but what was working or what they were doing before wasn't working. So we got to try something different. We got to be smart in how we do this. And that's where this current regime is as well.
So what do you think? Gensel and some spare parts, or the mid-level shopping spree? That's our poll question today. How should they go about doing it?
Well, where do we put a guy like Sam Reinhart? Is that a mid-level shopping spree?
No, I mean, he is a Gensel equivalent.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's a Gensel type.
Chance on Reinhardt?
It's possible. I mean, I think I certainly, obviously there'd be hometown interest. I think he's certainly a name that I think there's a name there that makes sense. I don't know necessarily how hot it would be, but there's a player that's Gensel like.
So we haven't heard them connected to Reinhardt. Do you know something here, Peach?
I'm just wondering. I'm mostly wondering aloud. I heard this from someone, but I don't have an extra bit, so I can't say definitively that's a thing. But it's something that I think makes sense given what the team is interested in. And yeah, we'll see. I cannot say there is hot interest or anything like that. But it is something I heard someone speculate earlier, and I was wondering, okay, that actually makes some sense. So it's something to kick tires on. And didn't have time to figure it out before I came on here.
Well, I mean, he's got a cup now, right? Like, maybe he, is interested.
He's double digits, though, isn't he? And he may not be a double digit player, but he's going to make double digit millions, isn't he? After 57 goals in the cup.
Well, yeah, I mean, it depends on what you're able to do and what he's after, right? Like he's now, he's 28. Is he after a huge long-term deal, or is he put himself in a different category? Like, if he's a guy if that's a guy that you can get, I mean, he's more expensive than Gensel. I mean, I will be clear, I gave him a Selke vote. I've been very impressed with his two-way game, especially as a winger. It makes sense to me as a player. I'm not sure the price makes sense. That's right. And so that's why I wasn't, that's why I was saying, listen, it's a thing that I can line up, but it's not necessarily something that I know for certain is something this team would actually do given the price.
Yeah.
But that's why I'm at, like, look, what are we talking about? If they don't get Gensel, what do you do? Right. Like, where do you get to? Toffoli, I think, is fun and interesting, but that's a mid-tier guy, right? Like, is that what we mean? So that's what we're talking about. And I think at the end of the day, part of the reason why you're finding this space is because of exactly what we said before. Like, you're trying to retain some of your guys, and it gives you a little more room to work on getting someone big, and it saves you room on getting someone big. And I don't have no doubt that that this team is after something big, and that's why I wonder about somebody like Sam Reinhart.
Dakota Joshua has re-signed with the Vancouver Canucks. It's a 4-year deal at $3.25 million. And full disclosure, we're getting word of this as we record. Initial impressions.
Well, I mean, it's like we said just a minute ago. There's a player that's done very, very well for himself. He's grown his game, proved to be an effective force in the regular season. The question now becomes, can he do that better than he did this year in the playoffs? That we saw a great first game in the playoffs and then not a lot from him, and then bits and pieces here and there. And certainly enjoyed watching him grow as a player, grow as a person. The guy that became a lot more confident speaking wise. I remember, very early on, kind of going up to him and being kind of alarmed. Oh, someone wants to talk to me, which I suppose, a guy who hadn't played a lot in the NHL, also came from St. Louis, which isn't a very busy media market, even if it's in a well-established organization. And by the end of this year, like, he is a guy that was fully ready to talk and had some banter. And, you had it sounds weird to say, but from a media standpoint, a bit of a throwback kind of guy. Like, not every player, and this wasn't always true, but he was a guy that had some ongoing banter and a willingness to sort of engage with ongoing storylines. And I selfishly, from a media standpoint, great to have. He's also got some really interesting insights into how the game works. I think he's a smart guy. He sees how things work. He knows that I think help explains why he was able to improve himself as a player and get better at what it was that he did best, and which is forechecking, learning how to use his size, getting his hands in on in and around the net, finding ways to finish. And 4 years obviously is a lot to commit to a guy who has really one strong year of play, but 2 years of growth. But at the end, it's you're not overcommitting to his 30s, and
Yeah, he
you are
just turned 28, so you've got
yeah.
you remember, you don't even have to pay him as a 32-year-old. Don't use that math. You're playing a full year as a 28, 29,
Yeah.
30, 31-year-old.
Yeah.
That's not bad. That's not
Yeah,
bad.
that's not bad. And let's be clear, in the end, a player's prime is in their early to mid 20s. So, he's sort of at the tail end of that. But a player with his kind of profile, a big, strong skater, physically imposing to a degree, those guys are able to maintain that until their early 30s. And some players are just late bloomers. And so, what is this a question? As someone pointed out to me in my draft story, we have this notion of, late round picks take longer. And they're like, is it really that late round picks take longer, or teams are just more risk averse with late round picks, that they should just let the guys play? And maybe that is the case with him. But either way, he's found his way in his mid to late 20s. And he's a quality player, and he's been a quality player. And I think there's every reason to think he'll be a quality player for the duration of this contract.
I mean, his pace, here's the good news on I don't think anybody's going to expect Dakota Joshua to be better than what he was. If he can replicate what he just did, he's still worth that money, right? Like, you're not looking for further development. He was on a 23-goal pace this year with 18 goals in 63 games. The question is, can he run that back and be the player?
Yeah, and listen, the price point, $3.2 million per season. That's a nice number for what they want him to be, right? Think about it. That's less than Ilya Mikheyev, right? And he was brought here to do the same thing as Ilya Mikheyev, which is help kill penalties and maybe score a little. And he scored more than Ilya Mikheyev, right? He's been he was essentially a 20-goal scorer this year.
And you know what? Ilya Mikheyev's not going anywhere if he makes 3.2. I really don't think so.
Probably not. Yeah. So it's a handy little signing, and I would say this is kind of what I imagined it would be. I don't necessarily I thought it'd be 4 years, but I thought it would be a 3-something, and they've got him at 3-something, and I think that's a number they wanted to get him at. So here we are.
Do you think they've gone ahead and done Joshua because Zadorov is still saying no?
I mean, I said from the start, I said already, I think in the end, Joshua was a guy that they really wanted to keep. He was higher up the priority list. Zadorov they liked, but only at a certain price. I think that was the important thing. And essentially to answer your question, I guess so. I think they've laid out their price points. They got Joshua on a price point I think they're comfortable with. And they're still sitting on a price point with Zadorov that I mean, unless things change by the time, because things could change in the next 2 hours. My impression for the whole time has been in the end, it's about price point and willingness to accept price point, and the fact that there's a guy like Brendan Dillon out there who may not be as exciting and thrilling as Zadorov, but is a very similar player in so many respects. If that's where the Canucks are able to go as an alternative, it would make sense to me why they would be holding firm on Zadorov.
I'm going to be shocked if they sign Zadorov at this point.
Yeah. I think this is kind of the canary in the mine shop. Yeah. I'm sorry for having to force you to repeat yourself. On
well, no, Patrick Alvin did this to us. Yeah, it's not you. Don't worry.
But you have a marvelous week, and we will catch up with you next Thursday.
It's going to be a busy couple of days for sure, but got the NHL awards and all that. So
yeah, lots coming.
Yep. Take care, guys.
Yep.
Hey, everybody! If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres and Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.